"There is no room in this passage for a woman," said the Duke of Charnwood, and he did not trouble to lower his voice, because the passage was full of men who had come on purpose to hear him not lower it. Damaris Culmer stayed where she was, in the doorway of the room where the biddings for the public loan would be opened in 11 weeks, with the wet of Whitehall still on the hem of her grey pelisse. She had come to give in a name. The porter had already told her that a bidding was received only from a list of 5 contractors of known substance, each with sureties, and that the Secretary of the Treasury did not read papers handed to him by anybody at all. "I have not asked for a room," she said. "I have asked for a form of the terms. Then take one, and take it home, and read it where it can do no harm." She took one. What she carried out of that passage was not a list of names, and it was not the form either, which she had known by heart since she was 14 years old. It was a folded sheet of ruled paper, soft at the creases from long use, on which a clerk had cast a column of figures 40 years before, and in 11 weeks that column would take 8 millions of the public money out of the hands of every man who had laughed in the passage behind her, and would do it in front of them, in the open, with the Chancellor's own arithmetic. Her father had been a loan contractor. Not a great one. Ellery Culmer had sat in the second chair of a list 4 times, and in the first chair once, and he had died on a settling day in the winter she turned 19, in a hackney coach between the bank and Capel Court, with a bundle of transfer receipts in his coat and a sum in his head that nobody was ever able to finish for him. The business had been sold up. The house in Bedford Row had gone. What Damaris had kept was the money her mother's marriage settlement had put beyond her father's reach, which was rather more than £40,000, the use of her great-aunt's fortune, which was above £600,000, and which Mrs. Honor Dace had never in her life known what to do with, and Job Tarrant. Tarrant had been her father's clerk for 31 years. He was a small, dry man with a bad chest and a beautiful hand, and he owned 4 books, 3 of which were tables. He had taught her the tables the way another child is taught the catechism, by daily repetition and without explanation. And one wet afternoon when she was 11, he had discovered, with no particular pleasure, that she had gone on past him. She could cast the present worth of a payment, 11 years off, at 4.5% in her head, and be within a shilling. She could do it still. It was not a gift. It was the only thing she had ever practiced. "They will not take a paper from you," Tarrant said, when she came back from Whitehall and set the form on the table and began to unpin her bonnet. "It is not the law. It is worse than the law. It is the custom. I know what it is. Then you know what it costs to go against it." "I know what it costs to be right in a room where nobody can check you," she said. "It costs nothing. That is why nobody troubles to be right. Put the kettle on the fire, Mr. Tarrant, and find me the Long Annuity tables, and the last 4 loans printed with the terms." The loan was a simple thing wearing a great many clothes. The government wanted 8 millions of ready money. It did not borrow it as a farmer borrows, at a rate of interest with the principal to come back. It borrowed it by selling stock. A man paid in £100 of money, and received in exchange a parcel of the public funds, so much of the 3% consolidated annuities, so much of the 3% reduced, and sometimes a slice of the long annuities, which were not perpetual at all but ran out in a fixed year and then stopped forever. That parcel, taken all together, was called the omnium. The receipt for the first deposit, which passed from hand to hand in the market before ever the stock existed, was the scrip, and the terms of the parcel were not fixed by the Chancellor. They were bid for. 4 or 5 lists of contractors, each of them a knot of bankers and merchants who had put their names and their sureties together, would come to the Treasury on the appointed morning with a sealed paper naming what they asked. One list would ask £128 of consols, and a long annuity of 5 shillings for every £100 it paid in. Another would ask 134 shillings. The Chancellor would take the prices of that morning off the board, cast each parcel at those prices, and give the loan to the list that asked the least. Ask too much, and you lost the loan to a hungrier man. Ask too little, and you got it, and it ruined you, because you had contracted to pay in 8 millions in 10 monthly installments for a parcel worth less than you had promised, and the market would know it by noon, and your scrip would go to a discount, and the discount would eat you at every installment until there was nothing left to eat. It is a wager on the price of consols, Elias Rook said to her, in the little back room off Capel Court where he kept his books, made by men who have no more notion of what consols will do in October than you or I. I have watched it 9 times. It is the largest wager in England, and it is decided by an eighth. Rook was a broker, and the only member of the House who had ever taken an order from her without first writing to her aunt to ask whether she was in her senses. He was a heavy, unhurried man who had gone bald early and had the habit of laying his hand flat on a page while he thought about it. "It is not a wager," Damaris said. "It is 3 prices wearing 1 coat. 2 of them every man in the house can see. And the third? The Long Annuities. The Long Annuities," Rook repeated, "stand at 15 years' purchase and have stood there since Lady Day, and nobody in the house will give you 15 1/8 for them, because nobody in the house wants them. They waste. Every year the thing you are holding is worth less than it was, because there is 1 year less of it. A jobber cannot turn it over. It sits in his book and shrinks." "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what I want you to find out for me. Not what the house will give. What a man will give who does not intend to turn it over at all." Rook laid his hand flat on the page. "There is no such man in the alley." "No," said Damaris Culmer, "there is not." She was talked of in the coffee house at the corner of Sweeting's Alley within the week, and by the end of the month there was an entry in the book, at Garraway's laying 20 guineas to 5, that no list bearing her money would be received at the Treasury at all. The wager was made by Mr. Lucius Marchbank, of Marchbank and Kessel, who discounted bills in Lothbury, and had sat in the 3rd chair of a list twice, and who told the room, with the pleasure of a man giving a present, that the young woman had a very pretty head for figures, and would find that a loan was not an examination. The idea itself did not come out of the tables. It came out of a ledger at the bank. She went in the first week of February to transfer £6,000 of reduced into her own name, and found the transfer books shut, as they are shut for weeks before every dividend, so that the warrants may be made up, and so she sat in the rotunda with her hands in her muff for an hour and a half, and listened to the trade being done. It was a fine noise. 200 men in a round room under a dome, calling prices at one another across a stone floor, and every one of them dealing in something he intended to be rid of by Saturday. Afterwards, a clerk she had known since she was a child let her look at what she asked to look at. which was not the consul ledger. It was the register of the proprietors of the Long Annuities. There were very few jobbers in it. There were parish trusts and the governors of 2 hospitals, and a company of vintners, and a great many women, and 4 fire offices, and the executors of 41 dead men. They had bought, and they had not sold. Some of the entries had not been touched in 19 years. She sat with the register open for a long time. Every price in the rotunda that morning had been made by men who bought in order to sell, and the whole of London took those prices as the value of the thing. But the people who actually owned the Long Annuities were not in the rotunda, and never had been. They were in vestries and boardrooms and back offices, and nobody had ever once gone and asked them what the stock was worth to them, because nobody had ever wanted to know. Mr. Tarrant, she said that evening, how much of the funds do you suppose is held by people who have no intention whatever of selling? The greater part of it, said Tarrant, who had never thought about it before in his life, and then sat down. The Duke of Charnwood called in Wimpole Street on a Tuesday, which was a courtesy, and brought his man of business with him, which was not. He was 32, black-haired, and built like a man who had spent his youth outdoors and his manhood in committee rooms. He was also, as Damaris had already established from the printed terms of 4 loans, the first chair of the strongest list in England. 400,000 of his own money. The Kessel Bank behind him, and a reputation with the Treasury for never once having failed an installment. I am told you mean to bid, he said, when the tea had been brought and Mrs. Dace had settled by the fire with the air of a woman prepared to enjoy herself. I am told it by 9 people, all of whom told it to me as a joke. I did not think it one. That is a beginning. It is also the end, I am afraid. A bidding is not refused because it comes from a lady. It is refused because it comes from a list. And a list is 5 men who are jointly and severally bound for 8 millions, and no 5 such men will bind themselves for 8 millions on your judgment when they may bind themselves on mine. He set down his cup. I have come to make you a fair offer. Take 100,000 of our subscription as a subscriber, at the premium of the day. You will earn what we earn. You will have the thing you want, which is a part in it, and you will not be ruined for it. I shall have a part in it, Damaris said, on the condition that the part is decided by you. On the condition that it is decided by 9 and 20 years of doing it. Then let us look at the 9 and 20 years. She had the 4 printed sheets ready on the table, because she had known since the passage at Whitehall that he would come, and what he would offer, and that she would need something better than refusal. Your list took the loan 2 years ago. For every £100 you paid in you, received £141 of consols, £14 of the reduced, and a long annuity of 3 shillings and 9 pence. Consols were at 63.5 on the day of the biddings, the reduced at 62.5, the long at 15 years' purchase. You have it by heart. That is charming. It is arithmetic, and it is not charming at all. At those prices your parcel was worth £101, 1 shilling and 11 pence. So your list made rather more than £27,000 on the whole loan, and your name in the alley is that of a man who bids fine and is never greedy. She turned the sheet round so that it faced him. Now count the annuity again. Not at 15 years' purchase. At what it is worth. 15 years' purchase is what it is worth. That is what the word purchase means. 15 years' purchase is what a jobber will pay for a thing he means to be rid of by Saturday. She put the point of her pencil on the line. The long annuities have 1 and 40 years still to run, and then they stop forever. An annuity of £1 a year for 1 and 40 years, reckoned at 5%, is worth £17 and 7 shillings and 6 of present money. At 4.5%, it is worth above £18.10. The house gives 15 because a terminable annuity wastes in a jobber's book, and he cannot sleep beside it. That is a dealer's price. It has nothing whatever to do with what the thing pays. Charnwood looked at the column for a long moment. His man of business, whose name was Peverell, had stopped writing. "Then everybody in the alley is wrong," the Duke said. "And you are right. Nobody in the alley is wrong. They are pricing what they can sell again on Saturday, and they price it very well. They are simply not pricing what I am asking about, and neither for 9 and 20 years have you." She sat back. "You gave away 3 shillings and 9 a year on every £100 of that loan, for 2.5 millions of subscription, because you took the alley's price for the one piece of the parcel that the alley cannot use. It came to a little above £11,000. You did not lose it to a rival. You handed it back to the Treasury, and you have never once looked to see." There was a silence of the kind that has a great deal of counting in it. 11,000, said Charnwood. 11,132, at 5%. He rose, and he did it civilly, and at the door he turned round. "Miss Culmer, suppose you are right. Suppose the annuity is worth 17.5 and the house will only give 15. You still cannot eat the difference. You would have to find a purchaser who will pay you 17.5 in cash for a stock the whole of London values at 15, and there is no such purchaser, because if there were, the price would not be 15. He put on his hat. "You have found a hole in the market. It is a hole with nothing at the bottom of it. Good day." She let him get as far as the stairs. "Your Grace, who insures your ships?" He stopped. "The Hanover office." "And when the Hanover office grants an annuity for a term of years upon a life, and binds itself to pay £4,000 every Michaelmas for the next 30 years, what does it buy with the premium?" "Consols, I imagine." "Consols," she agreed. "A stock that never ends, to pay a promise that does. So every Michaelmas the office must sell a little of its capital at whatever price the day happens to give it, and every Michaelmas a clerk writes a memorandum saying that the price was unfavourable. 30 times. Good day, Your Grace." Mr. Ambrose Kite, Secretary of the Hanover Fire and Life Assurance Office, kept her waiting 50 minutes in an anteroom with a stopped clock, and then gave her 7 of them. He was a spare, grey, exact person who had been a clerk in the same building for 26 years, and he had heard, he said, that she was raising money, and the office did not lend upon personal security. "I have not come to borrow," Damaris said. "I have come to sell you something you have been asking for since before I was born, and I should like to know first what your obligations are, not the lives, the fixed ones, the sums you have bound the office to pay every year, for a stated number of years, come what may." Kite's face did not change, but he sat down, which he had not done before. "That is not a question I am asked. No, it is a question the office asks itself every Michaelmas, and it has never once liked the answer." He got up and unlocked a press and brought out a folio, and by the time the bell went for 4 o'clock, he had told her a thing that no jobber in Capel Court knew, and that no jobber would have cared about if he had. The Hanover office was bound. Under a block of annuity business it had bought from a failed rival, to pay out £11,400 a year for the next 29 years. It had covered that promise with consols and with a mortgage on a brewery in Southwark. Every year it sold consols to meet it. In 2 of the last 5 years it had sold them at a loss so brisk that the directors had struck a special resolution about it, and then put the resolution away. "You wish me to buy Long Annuities," Kite said. "I wish you to stop trading in a market twice a year for the rest of your working life. Your promise ends in 29 years. The Long Annuities end in 41. There is not a perfect fit in England, but there is not a nearer one either, and the tale of 12 years is a present, not a fault. You would receive your money every 5th of January and 5th of July from the bank without selling a shilling of anything, and no clerk of yours would ever write that memorandum again. And the price. The house says 15 years purchase. The house is a shop, and a shop must be able to sell what it has bought. You are not a shop. You are a promise." She let that sit. 17.5. Kite laughed once, without any enjoyment. 17.5 for a stock quoted at 15. I should be dismissed within the hour. You would be dismissed if you paid 17.5 for something you meant to sell in March. Cast it as what it is. Cast what it costs the office to meet £11,400 a year for 29 years by selling capital into a bad market twice a year, at your own average of the last 5 years, and put that against the price of never doing it again. She rose and left the sheet of ruled paper on his desk, the soft one, with Terrence's 40-year-old column upon it. "I will call on Thursday. If the answer is no, I shall not trouble you a second time. If it is yes, I shall want it in one parcel, at a day I name, and I shall want your silence until that day, which will cost you nothing at all, since you will not wish to explain any of this to anybody until it is done." The answer on Thursday was yes, for the whole 11,400 a year, at 17 years' purchase and not a farthing over, payable on a day she should name. And the folio went back into the press, and Kite walked her to the door himself and did not say why. After that it was walking. She called on the governors of a hospital in Southwark, who had contracted with a builder for a new fever ward, and had bound themselves to pay him £2,000 a year for 22 years, and who were meeting it, at present, by selling a little of a legacy every Lady Day, and quarrelling about it. Their clerk, a young man with a great deal of forehead, informed her that the governors could not lawfully hold anything but the public funds. She agreed that this was so, and pointed out that a long annuity was the public funds, being an annuity charged upon the consolidated fund and transferable at the bank like any other, and asked him to read the 3rd clause of his own trust deed aloud. He read it aloud. 2 of the governors looked at the ceiling. She had the 2,000 a year at 17.25. She called on the commissioners for paving, lighting, and watching of a parish north of the road, who had borrowed £11,000 on the security of the rates, and were bound to repay it by fixed instalments over 16 years. She called on a dock company, a corporation of skinners, the trustees of a school in Hackney, and the executors of a West India merchant whose will bound his estate to pay 400 a year to a charity until a certain year, and then stop. She was refused 11 times. One of the refusals was a bank in the Poultry, where a partner told her, pleasantly, that they never did business with ladies, and she thanked him, and wrote the house down in a small book she kept for the purpose, under a heading of its own. By the last week of March she had, in writing, conditional undertakings from 19 bodies for £140,000 a year of long annuity, at prices between 17 and 17.5 years' purchase, every one of them conditional upon her having the annuity to deliver, and every one of them silent. Not a man in Capel Court knew that any of it had happened. There was no reason any of them should. 19 secretaries and clerks had each done one quiet piece of business in one quiet room, and none of the 19 had spoken to another, and none of them dealt in the alley, because none of them had ever had anything the alley wanted. Now, said Damaris, on the 10th of April, with the tables open and Terence ruled sheet flattened under the candlestick, and the fire built up because his chest was bad, we shall settle what we ask. It took them until 3 in the morning. Consols stood at 65, the reduced at 64, the long at 15 years' purchase, and Rook had confirmed that morning that a jobber would go to 15 and a 16th for a large parcel, and no further. Charnwood will ask 108 pounds of consols, 24 of the reduced, and 5 shillings of long, Damaris said. He has asked within a shilling of that 4 times running. That is 102 pounds, 6 shillings and 2pence for every 100 he pays in. He will think it fine. It is fine by the custom. And Kessel's list? 106 and 24 and 26 shillings, 101, 15 and 2pence. Tarrant wrote them down in his beautiful hand. And us. 120 of consols, 20 of the reduced, and 12 shillings of long. The pen stopped. That is 99 pounds and 16 shillings, Terence said after a moment, without needing the tables at all. You are offering to pay the Treasury £100 for 99 pounds and 16 shillings of stock. At the alley's prices. Yes, Miss Culmer. There is no list in the history of the funds that has bid under par. Not once. It is not thrift. It is not boldness. It is a thing that has never been done. Because the man who does it has, by his own hand, contracted to lose £16,000 before he has begun. At the alley's prices, she said again. Cast it at mine. 12 shillings of annuity, sold at 17 1/4, is £10 and 7 shillings, not 9. That makes the parcel £101 and 3 shillings, and I shall have paid 100 for it. £1 and 3 shillings in every 100, upon 8 millions, is £92,000. And not one of them can come within £2 of my bid and live, because not one of them can get more than 15 for the annuity. And if one of your 19 bodies fails you, then I have their hands to it in writing, and I have their reasons, which are better than their hands, because their reasons do not go away when the price moves. She trimmed the candle. That is the whole of it, Misty Tarrant. They are not wrong about the price. They are only answering a question I have not asked. She needed 5 names. She had 4 by the 2nd week in April. a Russia merchant who had let her show him how to save a bill of exchange that had been dishonored in Hamburg, and had thought about it for 2 days and then written his name without conditions. A widow in Highbury with £300,000 and a grievance against the Kessel Bank, an East India captain, and Mrs. Honor Dace, who signed with enormous enjoyment. The 5th would not come. 4 men refused her in a fortnight, all of them civilly, 2 of them after having said yes. And on the 21st of April, Miss Lucius Marchbank sent up his card. He was a broad, ruddy, friendly man of 50 who was liked everywhere, and he came in laughing at himself. "You will have heard of my wager at Garraway's," he said. 20 guineas to 5 that your list is never received. I find I have grown fond of it, and I do not like to lose money, and there is only one certain way to win a wager against a lady, which is to join her. Give me the 5th chair, Miss Culmer, and I shall bring £600,000 and the Lothbury connection, and I shall have my 5 guineas off myself and be very comfortable. She had him at the table for 2 hours and asked him everything. He answered all of it. His house was sound. She had already had Rook look at it. He asked for one thing. "I am 50, he said, "and I have a partner who has been ill, and I cannot bind my house for 1/5 of 8 millions in the dark. Put me in on my own account and not jointly, and give me one clause. If the terms your list bids are under par at the prices of the day, I may withdraw my subscription without forfeit within the hour." That is not distrust. That is what any prudent man's partner would insist upon, and mine will. It was the most reasonable thing he had said. It was also, she thought, a kindness she could afford, because the Treasury did not care how a list arranged itself inside, and held the first chair answerable for the whole, and because she was going to bid under par, and it seemed to her only fair that a cautious man should be told so beforehand in the one language he would be able to read on the morning. She wrote the clause herself. Tarrant engrossed it. Marchbank signed it, and shook her hand with both of his, and went out into the sun. Charnwood came on the last evening, alone this time, and stood in the middle of the room and would not sit down. "I have not come to argue," he said. "I have come because I have done this 9 times and you have done it never, and because I find I do not want to see it. There will be 4 lists in the room and every one of them will bid above par. Because every one of them must. Because we all pay in over 10 months and carry the stock and pay the brokerage and the losses, and par is where a man begins to work, not where he ends. If you bid under par, you will not be admired. You will be pitied by noon and sold by 4 o'clock, and there is not a jobber in the house who will not sell your scrip short the moment it is out, and the discount will find your installments one after another until it has all of you. And your advice: withdraw, bid with me next year. I will have you in the first chair beside me, and I will say so at the Treasury, with my hand on the table. And in 5 years there will not be a list in England without a Culmer in it. He said it well, and he meant it entirely, and it cost him something to say. You are the ablest person I have met in this business, and I include myself. That is why I am here. A woman cannot bid alone, Miss Culmer. Not because she is a woman. Because nobody will carry her when she is wrong. And if I am not wrong, then you will still be alone, he said. And being right alone in the funds is how my father's brother died. She stood a moment with her hand on the back of the chair. Your Grace, at what price does your list value the long? 15. It is quoted at 15. Thank you, said Damaris. I hope you will not think me uncivil tomorrow. The biddings were opened at 11 in a room in the Treasury with a coal fire, and 11 men and 1 woman in it, and the prices of the morning were written on a slate and set on the chimney piece where everybody could see them. Consols 65, reduced 64, Long Annuities 15 years purchase. Mr. Aubrey, one of the secretaries of the Treasury, took the sealed papers in the order they had been lodged. There were 4. The first asked 106 and 20 of consols, 4 and 20 of the reduced, and 6 shillings of long. A clerk cast it aloud at the prices on the slate, £101, 15 shillings and 2pence. The second asked 130 and 2 of consols, 20 of the reduced, and 4 shillings and 6pence of long. £101, 19 shillings and 6pence. The third was Charnwood's, 108 and 20, 4 and 20, 5 shillings. The clerk cast it. £102, 6 shillings and 2pence. Charnwood did not look at her. Aubrey broke the 4th seal and read it again, which he had not done with the others. £120 of the 3% consolidated annuities, he said. £20 of the 3% reduced, and a long annuity of 12 shillings. The clerk's pen scratched twice and stopped. £99 and 16 shillings, sir. There is a particular sound a room of gentlemen makes when it is deciding whether it is permitted to laugh, and then decides that it is. It went round the table once and came back. Somebody said, not quietly, that the arithmetic must be wrong, and the clerk, offended, cast it again and got the same, and the laughter began properly then, because it was not wrong, and because a bidding under par was the funniest thing that had happened in that room in 30 years. Miss Culmer, said Aubrey, when he could, you understand that you are asking of the public 4 shillings less in the 100 than the stock is worth this morning. On 8 millions, that is £16,000 you have made a present of. I understand the arithmetic, sir. Then the loan is yours, said Aubrey, and God be with you. And the room laughed again, and in the passage outside a man Damaris did not know clapped Marchbank on the shoulder and asked him what it felt like to be the 5th wheel of a wheelbarrow. The letter was on the table in Wimpole Street when she got home. It was very short and perfectly polite, and had been written, from the look of the ink and the hour, before the seals were broken. The terms bid by the list this morning being under par at the prices of the day, Mr. Marchbank begged to give notice within the hour as provided, that he withdrew his subscription of £1,600,000 without forfeit, under the clause of the 21st of April, and remained her obedient servant. The deposit was 10% of the whole, £800,000, payable at the Exchequer before 4 o'clock on the 3rd day, and the contract provided, as every loan contract had provided since anybody could remember, that a list which failed an instalment forfeited every payment it had already made. 4 of the 5 chairs were good for their shares. The 5th chair was a folded letter on a table in Wimpole Street, and £160,000 of it had to be on the counter at the Exchequer in 62 hours, and after that 160,000 more on the 5th of every month for 9 months, and there was nobody to find it but her. By 10 the next morning the house knew. The scrip of the new loan, which had opened at a discount of 1/2, was at a discount of 2.5 by noon, and Rook came up the stairs 2 at a time, which she had never seen him do. They are selling it that have not got it, he said. Blount has sold 300,000 for the account. Ord has sold 2. Marchbank himself has sold 400,000 and told the room why, and the room is repeating it in the coffee houses. It is a very good story, Miss Culmer, and I am sorry to bring it to you. They say the lady has bid 4 shillings under par, lost her 5th chair inside an hour, and will forfeit her deposit before the leaves are out, and they are selling your scrip at 97.5 for the account, meaning to buy it back off the wreck at 92. For the account, Damaris said. Not for money, for the account. There is not £100 of it delivered. They have none of it. They will buy it when it is cheap, and deliver then, and take the difference. Rook laid his hand flat on the table. That is the whole of their plan, and it is a sound one. And it has broken better houses than yours. There is nothing in law to prevent it. There is nothing in law about any of it. A bargain for time in the funds is void by the old Act against stock jobbing and has been these 80 years. No court in England will hear a word of it, on either side. The House settles its own quarrels, or they are not settled. Yes, she said. Thank you, Misty Rook be at the Hanover office at 2. Kite kept her waiting 4 minutes this time. I have read the notice in the paper, he said. I have also read what was in the coffee house, which reached this building before the paper did. I am instructed by 2 of my directors to ask you whether the office's undertaking is still binding upon it, and I am instructed by a 3rd to ask you nothing at all and put the folio back in the press. Your undertaking is conditional upon my having the annuity to deliver, Damaris said. I have it. The loan is contracted, and the long annuity of £48,000 a year will be created and standing in my name at the bank as the instalments are paid, and 11,400 of it is yours at 17 years' purchase, which is £193,800. That was the bargain, and I hold to it. But I have not come to hold you to a day. I have come to ask you to move it, to pay me now, and take delivery as the stock is created, upon my personal covenant, and my aunt's, and the covenant of 4 names you may inquire of this afternoon. And because that is a favor, and not a right, you shall have it at 16 3/4 instead of 17, which is a present to your office of £2,850 for the loan of your own money for a few months. Kite looked at her for a while. You are asking me to hand you £190,000, he said, on the morning that all London says you are ruined. All London says I am ruined because I bid 4 shillings under par. All London believes the annuity is worth 15. If all London were right about the annuity, your office would not have signed in March. And you did not sign in March because you are a gambler, Mr. Kite. You signed because you have £11,400 a year to find for 29 years, and no other instrument in England will find it for you without a clerk selling capital twice a year, into whatever market God sends. She set the paper down. The discount on my scrip is a wager on whether I can pay an installment. It is not an opinion about your promise. Your promise does not move. Nothing that happens in Capel Court between now and Michaelmas alters by 1 shilling what your office owes its annuitants, and nothing alters what this stock will pay you every 5th of January for 41 years. He walked to the window and stood there with his hands behind him. The tale, he said, the 12 years beyond our obligation, is yours, and it is worth £25,000, and I am giving it to you along with the 2,850, and I am doing it because I want your money on Friday and you want it not to be a favor. She had the draft on the bank at 3:30 the following afternoon. She had 4 more before the week was out: the hospital, the paving commissioners, a dock company, and the trustees of the school at Hackney, none of whom read the alley's opinions, and 2 of whom had not heard them. On the 3rd day at 17 minutes before 4 o'clock, Tarrant carried the deposit to the Exchequer in a hackney coach with Rook beside him, and the receipts came back at 6. Then she did the thing that nobody in the alley thought to look for, because it was not in the alley. The loan contract, like every loan contract, allowed a discount for prompt payment. A contractor who paid an installment before the day it fell due was allowed 4% a year upon it for the time he was in advance. It was a clause everybody knew and nobody used, because a contractor's money was always working and never idle, and no man carrying 8 millions on credit had a spare shilling to pay a thing before it was asked for. Damaris had £700,000 of annuity money that had come in during May for stock she would not receive until the winter, and her own 40,000 behind it. Until it was paid in, it was doing nothing whatever. She paid it in. On the 6th of May she paid, in advance of their days, the last 3 installments upon Marchbank's share, on the 2nd of June the last 3 upon her own, and the Exchequer allowed her 4% upon every day she was in advance. Tarrant cast the allowance in his beautiful hand at the foot of the page in the middle of June, and then sat looking at it with his spectacles in his fist. £19,200, he said. You have made £19,200 out of the calendar. Out of their calendar, said Damaris. They are all of them borrowing at 5 to carry stock they have not paid for. I am lending at 4 to the government by paying early for stock I have not received. It is the same clause. It has been in every contract for 40 years. Not one of them has ever had the money to use it, because not one of them has ever sold anything before he had it. You have made back the 16,000 you gave away, and 3,000 besides, and the loan is not half run. Write it out fair, she said, and date it and put it in the box. There will be a morning when somebody asks. Mrs. Honor Dace came into the office in the last week of June, which she never did, and sat down on the good chair with her stick between her knees. They tell me at the circulating library that I am ruined, she said. A woman I have not spoken to in 9 years crossed the room to be sorry for me. Am I ruined, Damaris? No. Say the rest of it. You subscribed £1,600,000, and you have paid in 480,000 of it, and if the loan fails you forfeit every shilling you have paid, said Damaris. That is £480,000 of your own money. It would leave you the Wiltshire property and about 900 a year, and you would have to give up the carriage. Her great-aunt considered this. And if it does not fail, then you will have made rather more than £18,000, and every one of those women will call. Both of those are bearable, said Mrs. Dace, which is what I came to find out, and you might have told me in April instead of letting me hear it from a woman in a bonnet. She got up. Your father used to come home from a settling day and tell me it had all gone splendidly, and it had not. Twice you have told me the worst first. I find I like it better, and I do not enjoy it at all. Charnwood came on the 28th of June, and this time he did not send up a card. He came into the office behind the house where she worked, past Tarrant, who did not stop him, and he had a paper in his hand, and a look she had not seen on him. "I have been shown the clause," he said. "Marchbank has been showing it. He shows it after dinner, as a piece of wit. He wrote to my man in March, before he ever came to you, to ask what terms my list would bid, and my man told him nothing, and he went to you the same week and asked for a chair, and asked for that clause, and it is drawn so that it fires only if you bid under par." He put the paper on her desk. He did not join your list to be in it. He joined it to be able to leave it at the worst hour of your worst day, and then to sell your scrip short with the whole town watching him do it. "I know," said Damaris. "I have known since the 2nd of May. Then why in God's name have you said nothing?" "Because I wrote the clause. He asked for it, and I wrote it, and I wrote it because I thought it fair to warn a cautious man that I meant to bid under par." She squared the sheets on the desk. "There is no wrong in it that a court would look at, and there is nothing in it I could complain of without complaining chiefly of myself. And because a person who spends the summer explaining that she has been ill-used is not paying installments." Charnwood put both hands on the back of the chair. "Then let me end it. My bank will take Marchbank's 5th on your terms and at your figure, and I will put my name to it this afternoon, and by Monday there will not be a jobber in the house who dares be short of your scrip. I am not asking anything for it. I am asking to be allowed to do it." It was, she thought afterwards, the first entirely disinterested thing any man in the business had ever offered her. "No," she said. "Miss Culmer, if your name goes on my paper today, then for the rest of my life the story is that the Duke of Charnwood carried the lady's loan when it went wrong. And it will be told kindly, and it will be true, and it will end me. There is exactly one thing I have that no man in the alley has, and it is not money and it is not nerve. It is that they cannot yet imagine what I am doing." She took up her pen. "But you may do something else, if you mean it. Name it." "On the settling day in July, be in the house," said Damaris. "Stand where you can see, and whatever is said to me, and whatever I say, do not open your mouth once." The summer was long, and nothing in it was pleasant. The scrip stayed at a discount of 2.5, and then 3, because the men who had sold it went on telling the story that made it cheap, and the story was cheap to tell. Terence chest was bad through the whole of June, and she sent him to Margate in July, and he came back in a week, saying the sea disagreed with arithmetic. Twice the discount reached 4, and the paper spoke of the contractors of the loan in the past tense. In the 2nd week of June, a bill of hers for £1,100 was refused at the bank in the Poultry, which had no reason to refuse it except that it wished to, and she walked to Lothbury in the rain and got it done elsewhere, and did not mention it to anybody for 11 years. And through all of it, Rook bought. Buy it, she had told him on the 9th of May. Every pound of it they offer, for the account, at 97.5 or better. As much as they will sell. They are selling it because they believe it will be at 92. They are selling it because they believe I shall be forced to sell 3 millions of it in August to find my installments, said Damaris. I paid my August installments in May. There will be no 3 millions. They have sold a flood that is not coming. Rook stood with his hat in his hand and worked it through slowly, the way he worked through a page. Then where? He said, do they get it? At the settling. That, she said, is their question, and I would very much rather they asked it late. They asked it late. The whole of the new loan was 8 millions of money, and for every £100 of it there were £120 of consols, 20 of the reduced, and 12 shillings a year of long annuity. 4 of the 5 chairs were contractors holding for the rise and would not sell at a discount to oblige anybody. The 5th share, and her own, were paid up to the last instalment and lodged, and the annuity out of them was gone. 19 bodies had it in their strong boxes at 17 years' purchase, against obligations running 9 and 20 and 2 and 20 and 16 years, and not one of the 19 would sell it at 15 or at 20, because not one of them had bought it to sell. The dock company would have thought the suggestion improper. The governors in Southwark would have had to call a meeting. By the 2nd week of July there was, in the whole of London, a little under £400,000 of the new scrip loose in the market and free to be bought. And the house had sold for the account £1,300,000 of it. They came to her before the settling, which she had not expected quite so early. Blount came first, the jobber, at 8 in the morning, hat in hand, and asked what she would take to close. "I will take delivery," said Damaris. Ord came at noon and offered to pay the difference at 99, and then at par, and then at 102, and grew loud about it, and told her that a bargain for time was void by the act, and that if she chose to be disagreeable, he would simply decline to settle, and she might whistle for it in any court in England. "You are quite right about the act," she agreed. "I have known it since I was 14. No court will hear me. That is why I am not going to a court." Settling day was the 15th of July, and by 11:30 the house at Capel Court was as full as it is at the news of a battle, because the story had got out at last, and it was a better story than the first one. She was not a member, and could not go in. She stood in the passage at the foot of the stairs, with Tarrant on one side of her, and Rook's clerk on the other, and Rook went up and did what a broker does, which is to demand, on behalf of his principal, the delivery of £1,300,000 of scrip of the new loan, bought for the account at an average of 97 5/8. It could not be delivered. It was not there to deliver. By the rule of the house, which is not law and is a great deal more use than law, a seller who fails to deliver upon the day is bought in against. The committee appoints an official broker. The broker goes into the market and buys the stock at the best price he can get, and the defaulter pays the difference. And if he cannot pay it, his name is written up on the board by the door, and he does not come in again. There were sellers of the new scrip that morning to the extent of perhaps £60,000. There were buyers in to the extent of £1,300,000. Every man in that house could do the sum. The buying in price would have gone through 110 and kept going, and it would have taken Ord's house and Blount's and Marchbank and Kessel with them, and 11 others, and it would have been perfectly regular, and there was not one thing any of them could have done except stand there and watch it happen. Rook came down the stairs and said, "They have asked whether you will come up." "I cannot come up. I am not a member. The committee is aware of that," said Rook. "They have asked whether you will come up." She went up. The Duke of Charnwood was standing at the back by the pillar with his arms folded, and did not open his mouth, then or afterwards, which she had asked of him, and which he found harder than he had expected. The chairman of the committee said that an irregular situation had arisen, and that the house would be glad to hear anything she wished to say to it. I bought £1,300,000 of scrip at an average of 97 5/8, said Damaris Culmer from gentlemen who did not have it, on the understanding that I should be ruined by August and made to sell it back to them for nothing. I am entitled to be bought in at whatever the market will bear, and the market this morning will bear a very great deal, because there is nothing in it. I am told the figure would be somewhere above 110. Nobody said anything at all. I will take par, she said, and 4% upon the money for the days it has been out, and not 1 farthing more, and I will take it from every man in this room upon the same terms, whether he was loud in the coffee-house or quiet. There was a noise then that Tarrant, who was at the door, said afterwards he had never heard in that building, and could not describe and did not care to hear again. On one condition, which is not money. She waited until it was silent. That this house hears why the stock was not to be had, because it was not luck, and I do not want it written down as luck. You sold the scrip of this loan short, because you believed I must sell 3 millions of it in August to pay my installments. I paid my August installments in May out of money I had from 19 fire offices, hospitals and paving commissioners in March, for the long annuity at 17 years purchase and better. One of them at 17.5, which every man here has priced at 15 for 11 years, and which is worth 17 and 7 6 by the tables at 5%, and any of you may cast it tonight and find me wrong. She put the ruled sheet down on the chairman's table, the soft one, 40 years old. You were not wrong about the price. You were answering a different question. The market prices what it can sell again. It never prices what a man means to keep. The chairman of the committee asked her, in the silence, at what price she would sell the remainder of the annuity in her hands. 17.25, said Damaris, and there are £7,000 a year of it, and I would advise the gentlemen who insure ships to be quick. The loan was paid up by the middle of November. The scrip, that had been at a discount of 3 in June, stood at a premium of 1 3/4 when the last installment went in, and the omnium at 2.5. And when Tarrant closed the book, the whole of it, the 92,000 out of the annuity, the 19,200 out of the calendar, the 30,000 and odd out of the buying in, less everything the summer had cost in brokerage, carriage and refused bills, came to £114,000 and some odd shillings, which he wrote out fair and dated. Mr. Aubrey of the Treasury, who had said God be with you and had meant it as a joke, wrote to her in October to ask, in his private capacity and with an apology in the second line, upon what principle a terminable annuity ought to be valued in the biddings, since it had come to the board's notice that the public had been giving them away for some years. She sent him Tarrant's column. It is in the Treasury still. Mr. Blount the jobber, who had sold £300,000 of a thing he did not own, said in Garraway's in August that he had been in the house 31 years, and had never before been in a room where a woman explained to it what it had been selling, and that he had voted with his feet the following week by buying long annuities, and that they had gone up. The young man with the great deal of forehead, who had told her that his governors could not lawfully hold anything but the public funds, was clerk to 4 boards within 3 years, and told each of them the same thing about matching a promise to a stock, and always said where he had it from. which is rarer than being right. Mr. Lucius Marchbank paid at par and 4% like everybody else, and his house stood, and he was not written up on the board by the door. He was never asked into a list again. He had come to her asking for a clause that would let him leave without forfeit, and she had written it herself, and he had used it exactly as it was written, and the whole of his punishment was that every man in the city now knew he had needed one. Charnwood came in December, and he came at 10 in the morning to the office behind the house, and he had a case of papers under his arm, and Tarrant let him in without being asked twice. "My list bids in March," he said. "I have 3 chairs, and I do not want a 4th and a 5th. I want the tables. You want to buy the tables? I want to buy an hour of the woman who reads them, twice a year at whatever she charges, and I am prepared to be told the price in front of my partners so that nobody can say afterwards it was a kindness." He set the case down. "And I want to say one thing first, since you asked me not to say anything in July, and I have been carrying it about since. Say it. I told you in April that a woman could not bid alone, because nobody would carry her when she was wrong. He was not comfortable, and he did it anyway, standing up, in front of Tarrant, which she noticed. I was wrong about the annuity for 29 years, and it cost my house £11,000 in one loan alone, and God knows what in the others. You were not carried. You carried the 5th chair of your own list for 9 months out of money you had made out of a clause in a printed contract that I have signed 9 times without reading. I have been in this business since I was 21, and I have never once seen it done better, and I include the men I learned it from." Damaris Culmer put down her pen. "You may have the hour," she said, "twice a year, and you shall have it at 100 guineas, and I shall name it in front of your partners, and Mr. Tarrant will send in the account because he likes doing it." "And the rest of it," said Charnwood, "which I am not going to be clever about, because I have watched what happens to men who are clever in this room. I should like to call, not upon the tables." She looked at him for a while, which for her was a long time. "The long annuity is 41 years, she said. "That is a great deal of anything." "I have no objection to the tale," said the Duke of Charnwood. "It is a present, not a fault. You told Kite so in May." And Damaris Culmer, who had been told in a passage at Whitehall that there was no room for her, and told in her own drawing-room that a woman could not bid alone, and who had taken 8 millions of the public money in front of every man who had said it, took up the ruled sheet her father's clerk had cast 40 years before, and turned it round on the desk so that it faced him, and showed him where the column began.